Dear Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for taking the time to join us here today for the presentation of the Bulan Institute's Compendium of Promising Practices in the Rehabilitation and Reintegration of ISIS-linked women and children. My name is Zachary Thiessen. I'm a research assistant here at the Bulan Institute, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's event. Our research team developed this compendium, and the compendium is now available to view on our website at the Bulan Institute. Since 2019, ISIS associates and family members have been held by the same democratic forces in prisons and camps in northeast Syria. And while repatriation efforts towards women and children thus far have been limited, the compendium examines existing experiences of repatriation and rehabilitation in the case of 7 countries, which include Central Asian case studies that consist of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan, who collectively have repatriated a large number of women and children. And alongside that, we also examine European case studies that include Kosovo, Germany, and the Netherlands. And after a 6-month research process, the Bulan Institute has identified 9 promising practices along with points of divergence regarding reintegration and rehabilitation practices. And in total, the compendium aims to enhance interstate learning and contribute to the development of comprehensive rehabilitation and reintegration programs. And thus today, we will look at promising practices, divergences, and challenges that are posed by ISIS-linked female and child rehabilitation and reintegration efforts. And to discuss this, we are honored to welcome His Excellency Mr. Irfan Saeed, who is the head of countering violent extremism at the Bureau of Counterterrorism of the US Department of State, along with Her Excellency Ms. Finenola Neoline, who is the UN Special Rapporteur on the promotion and protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms while countering terrorism. Alongside that, we are also joined by Ms. Chopano Rozbakova, who is the director here at the Bulan Institute for Peace Innovations. So to all our guests, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. And this event has been organized by the Bulan Institute. The Bulan Institute is a research institute that is based here in Geneva, and we also have a regional office in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan. Altogether, our mission is to promote peace, security, and human rights in Central Asia, Eurasia, and South Asia through a combined approach of research, advocacy, and dialogue. And again, a kind reminder to all our participants here today, please do keep both your microphone and video turned off throughout the event. And so before we get into the presentation of the compendium here, I do have the great honor to give the floor for opening remarks to His Excellency Mr. Irfan Saeed, who again is the Director of Countering Violent Extremism at the Counterterrorism Bureau of the US State Department. And so with that being said, Mr. Saeed, the floor is yours.
Okay, Zachary, thank you. First, let me start with the general greeting. Can you hear me? I think we can. Okay, great. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. That's the second WebEx Zoom greetings that we have in this post-COVID world that we're in. And in a strange twist of fate, I flew all the way to Geneva, and yet we're still meeting virtually. So at one point, I hope that we're all back in the same room together, having this type of discussion, but also the discussions that really exist behind the scenes, which is where a lot of the good work also happens. But let me start by thanking the Bulan Institute for hosting this event and continuing to emphasize the need for repatriation, rehabilitation, and reintegration efforts. It's absolutely a pleasure to share the stage with Her Excellency, the Special Rapporteur. It's great to see you online. And I've got to start also by thanking the US mission here in Geneva, who not only has been a great partner to the CT Bureau, but has been a very good partner to the Bulan Institute. And has provided this great background for me here with the flag and the blue thing behind me. So great thanks to my partners here at the US Mission in Geneva. But look, Zach, you started off by saying something very important, and I wanted to touch upon that as I get into the remarks today. And that's, when we talk about the terrorism threat, we cannot forget the lingering terrorism threat that exists in northeast Syria and the just horrific conditions that exist in some of these displaced persons camps and prisons in Northeast Syria. So when we talk about how do we prevent and counter violent extremism and how do we counter terrorism, we can't forget of the job that sort of was halfway done. We need to complete the job. And part of that completion of the job is addressing the challenges of returning families of foreign terrorist fighters. And that remains a top priority for the State Department. It remains a top priority for the United States government. It remains a top priority for the White House. We appreciate the continued work of all of our organizational and country partners, especially those in Central Asia who really were one of the first to agree to repatriate their citizens and really put some thought into what does a psychosocial support look like in rehabilitating and reintegrating their citizens back into society. Of course, the Bulan Institute's ongoing research and advocacy of the good practices that are out there, it's invaluable as a lot of countries grapple with these issues. There are examples from many governments and organizations about how to address the effective responses to returning FTFs and their families through real-world examples. And I think this compendium does a great job of answering the question from other partner countries when they ask, how do we do it? What do we do when they come back home? And again, this compendium, and I hate to use this as a show and tell, but this really was and is a great document. And I encourage everybody to get online, to get the compendium, share it with whoever needs to see this type of work. And the key practices that you've identified here are top notch. And so I'll talk a little bit about that, but I'll also talk a little bit about our approach writ large. Let me also start by talking about some other resources that exist out there, because obviously this is a good one, but we've got, the Hague Marrakesh Memorandum on Good Practices for a more effective response to the FTF phenomenon. And there's an addendum to that as well, with a focus on returning FTFs. There's also the good practices on addressing the challenge of returning families of foreign terrorist fighters. And then we also have the Rabat, Washington good practices on the prevention, detection, intervention, and response to homegrown terrorism. So they're all references. And I think what the Bulan Institute has done very well is to ensure that the reference library remains strong. We can't ignore that the serious concerns posed by detainee and displaced person populations in Northeast Syria, because those concerns, they won't ignore us and they won't go away. And the best way to keep fighters and associated family members in Northeast Syria from escaping and crossing borders undetected is through the repatriation, rehabilitation, reintegration, and sometimes prosecution when appropriate. Countries in Central Asia, as I noted, have been leaders in repatriating their nationals and have demonstrated very clearly that it's possible to do so. And with the numbers that they've done and the good work that they've done on the front end and the back end, they serve as very good examples. And we've seen a lot of other countries follow suit. So let me start with Kazakhstan, the Kyrgyz Republic, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan in particular. They have repatriated well over 1,000 nationals from Iraq and Syria, and they haven't stopped there. As they continue to look at investigating and prosecuting fighters, and they also support localized community-based rehabilitation and reintegration efforts for the family members. So it's a whole of government, whole of society approach on both ends. And to encourage countries to repatriate their citizens from Northeast Syria, we must all work harder to build capacity in source countries to rehabilitate and reintegrate those citizens who joined ISIS. So to do so, we also must support financially the organizations that work on repatriation and rehabilitation and reintegration programs like the Bulan Institute. Also here in Geneva, we have the Global Community Engagement and Resilience Fund, GSERF, which has been doing some excellent work on building R&R programs in places like the Western Balkans. I'll also point to Hidayah, who's done some really good work in this space. I'll also point to the International Institute for Justice and the Rule of Law, that has really put forth a lot of effort on rehabilitation, reintegration, and prosecution where appropriate. For our part, the United States, to continue to assist in these efforts, we provide significant funding to support all of these programs and initiatives, but we also support programs to detain and manage foreign terrorist fighters in detention centers and post-release programs, and the rehabilitation, reintegration of FTF family members from the region who travel to Syria and Iraq. In Central Asia, this includes technical assistance programs with Kazakhstan, with the Kyrgyz Republic, and Tajikistan, focused on prisons, but also community-based rehabilitation and reintegration. Also over in Uzbekistan, where the government has repatriated more than 400 family members. The United States supports repatriation, rehabilitation, reintegration work through the UNOCT's whole of UN global framework, as noted in the compendium. And we are funding a Tashkent-based advisor. So I want to stress that the United States, number one, views FTF repatriation as a collective effort. Number two, we prioritize the rehabilitation and reintegration of returning family members. And three, we seek to leverage and pool available international community resources to support these global efforts. So it's essential for all countries to repatriate their citizens from Northeast Syria. It is the only durable solution. Not repatriating these citizens will only further destabilize this region and all but guarantee we will again face more capable and resurgent ISIS legions in the years to come. So again, I'm so happy to see the development of this compendium. And as noted in the compendium, we need to support effective rehabilitation, reintegration efforts to prepare communities to welcome rather than stigmatize returnees. Returned family members need tailored responses that promote human rights and that can account for their individual circumstances. Here, civil society's role is absolutely critical, as discussed in the compendium, and it's instrumental in creating sustaining and impactful solutions for rehabilitation reintegration programs. So the key practices that are identified in the compendium are well thought out, they're well developed, and we agree with every good practice listed. So for instance, we talked about civil society. Civil society groups bring the local knowledge. They bring trusted relationships and technical skills to rehabilitate and reintegrate. They can provide important psychosocial support. They can provide faith-based support. They can provide counseling, education, economic opportunity, comprehensive family health, and social services. Civil society can also create an environment within receiving communities that fosters long-term success for these families. Many in receiving communities are distrustful and angry over their neighbors' participation in terrorist groups. Others may resent expanded services these families receive. So civil society groups have been instrumental in creating programs that skillfully address such grievances while reducing the stigma on returnees. But again, it's a whole of society, whole of government, and government needs to be involved at all levels. Government should support civil society-based efforts through capacity building and providing resources to ensure sustainability as well as autonomy to work. Allowing civil society the space to be active supports longer-term national security and stability. We also need to leverage available resources, including international good practices. Some of them I talked about earlier. We talked about GSURF. We've talked about Hidayah. Hidayah has a blueprint for a rehabilitation reintegration center. Bilaterally, we have supported Kazakhstan and the Maldives in designing and implementing local R&R programs and services. I'm also happy to share that the Bureau of Counterterrorism at the State Department has supported development of several frameworks for best practices in rehabilitation reintegration, such as some of the good practices I outlined earlier. And the United States has also assisted in providing technical assistance to repatriating countries, such as Kazakhstan and the Maldives, among many others, for purposes of providing the most up-to-date evidence-based practices in psychosocial support and reintegration services. We have to stress that the best type of R&R programs are in the non-custodial setting, something that has been talked about in the compendium. And we want to do is ensure that we have the psychosocial support and the programs and initiatives in source countries so that we can get these people out of Northeast Syria, get them back home, and get them the support that they need at home. The United States does this by example as well. We have demonstrated our commitment to support repatriation, and we've taken back 39 of our own citizens, and we also support local R&R efforts here in the United States. We want to encourage more countries like our Central Asian and Western Balkan partners to do the same with their own local contexts. So in conclusion, I wanted to, first of all, say thank you, Chilpan, thank you to everyone at the Bulan Institute for the work that you do. It's important. It goes a long way to show that there is a process, there is a way to get people out of Northeast Syria, to ensure that we don't see a resurgence of ISIS, of other terrorist organizations. And there's a way to ensure that the human rights, the civil rights and liberties are protected of those individuals who are women and children who are in displaced persons camps, who need to be brought home, rehabilitated, and reintegrated back into society. Let me stop there. I look forward to hearing from Her Excellency and, of course, some of the discussion as well. And if I haven't said it before, I'll say it again. please take a look at the compendium. It's really good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Saeed, for your very generous comments. And thank you as well for your contribution in not only countering terrorism, but promoting reintegration and repatriation efforts as well. And in total, we would also like to thank the U.S. Department of State for its substantial efforts towards contributing to international efforts related to returning fighters and their family members. And so that, with that being said, now it is time to present the Compendium of Promising Practices. And for this, I'm delighted to give the floor to our director here at the Bulan Institute, Ms. Chopan Rozbekova. And just a kind reminder to our participants, following the presentations here today, we will have a question and answer session where the experts will answer questions from our participants here today. And if you do have a question, please leave it in the Zoom chat on the right-hand side of your screen. And I'd also like to add that our session here today will be recorded for our partners on social media and to be posted on our website. And so with that being said, I would like to give the floor to our director, Ms. Chopan Rozbekova.
Thank you very much, Zachary. So dear excellencies and ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. And we are delighted to present the Compendium of Promising Practices in the Rehabilitation and Reintegration of ISIS-linked women and children. So first, I would like to thank His Excellency Mr. Irfan Sayed for joining us today and for his generous comments and for the thoughts about the current situation related to ISIS associates. And I thank also Her Excellency Fionnuala Nyawalayan for being with us today. And just a kind reminder that Mr. Irfan Sayed will be leaving us earlier. So if you have a question to him, please leave in the chat. So we will make sure that he can answer before he leaves. Thank you very much. So I will share the my slides first. So can you see my screen? Yeah. So this compendium is a result of extensive research of the Bulan Institute. So we specifically worked on the compendium for last 6 months, and I would like to thank US Embassy in Geneva for support of this project. But I would like to say that in general, it's a result of our 2 years, more than 2 years, we have been working to study existing experiences of rehabilitation and reintegration, specifically in Central Asia and also in Europe. So I would say that it's a result of our 2 years work, because we have been observing, studying, and documenting also promising practices. So, but for this compendium, we organized 2 workshops. They were organized to facilitate knowledge transfer and to hear from first-line practitioners. And we invited speakers, practitioners from Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, to hear from them about the existing experiences and promising practices. And then we also conducted interviews with practitioners, specifically with practitioners, to understand what's going on on the ground and what kind of interventions are in place. And for the purpose of this compendium, promising practices have been identified as those approaches, policies, and activities considered by the research team as likely to lead to desired and improved positive outcomes. And I would like to highlight that the main focus of this compendium is non-custodial rehabilitation and reintegration. So that's why it's only about children and women. So we are not talking about male fighters here. So the focus countries are 4 Central Asian countries, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and 3 European countries, Kosovo, Germany, and Netherlands. So we identified 9 promising practices. So here you can see the list. First is identification, alignment, and coordination of multi-stakeholders, actors, main actors, and then careful mapping, coordination of resources and capacities, and detailed guidance. And key practice 3 is about civil society. And key practice 4 is about multidisciplinary specialists. It's really key to mobilize and train them in advance. And key practice 5 is importance of family ties, and their participation is really crucial to support returnees. And key practice 6 is, of course, about children. Children should be treated as victims, and all actions of state should be at child's best interests. And key practice 7 is media strategy, conveying narratives to the public. And key practice 8 is securing long-term psychological assistance. It's really important for both children and women. And 9 is about female returnees, how they are going to survive. So they join their family members, but they become burden for them. And it's really important to support them, to give them new skills, to empower them, so they can get economically independent. So let's talk about the key practices. So I will go one by one, and I will give some concrete examples from some countries. So first key practice is identification, alignment, and coordination of all actors, non-state and state actors, and their role, identifying their roles also. It's really important to do this as early as possible, and aligning them and discussing with them a general vision and establishing a kind of sort of roadmap, how to move forward. And then also it's really important to have identified distinct roles, so to avoid any kind of overlapping and unnecessary duplications. And of course, it's really important to have non-state actors, civil society organizations, community leaders, religious leaders. So this kind of approach guarantees a whole of society approach, which leads to positive outcomes. So key practice 2 is careful mapping and coordination of resources and capacities, and having kind of guidelines to have a vision, certain vision, how to move forward. So focus countries, they develop different frameworks, and so some of them, they had guidelines, or I don't know, national plan, action plan, and then they made kind of mapping of the existing resources and capacities, and developed a tailored plan, including key guidelines. And also they had multi-agency structure at the national level and local levels. And then it was important to identify leading actor. And some countries, they had special institutions established for the returnees. So I will give some examples. For example, Germany. Germany adopted a special guideline kind of model titled Coordination for Returning FTFs and Families from Syria and Iraq. And then Germany had established special positions, returnee coordinator positions. So it's kind of regional coordinators in each state. And they maintain overview of the situations on the ground and what kind of needs they have. They monitor, they follow up, and this position was really crucial in Germany and played an important role. And when it comes to the Kosovo, for example, Kosovo also had division for prevention and reintegration. It was a special division, which was established after the special guidelines was adopted. And Tajikistan also had working group, and Netherlands had dynamic assessment approach, the framework which set out how to deal with women and children, and how to assess legal assessment, individual assessment. So this framework have kind of set of rules how to move forward. And then, as Mr. Irfan Sayed highlighted, of course, civil society organizations, they play really crucial role. If you compare, for example, examples of those countries which didn't involve civil society organizations, many phases of rehabilitation failed. But in many majority of the focus countries, engaging civil society organizations gave very positive outcomes. It widens ownership and improves implementation of many phases. For example, in Kosovo, several non-governmental organizations such as Community Development Fund, Kosovo Center for Security Studies, Kosovo Rehabilitation Center for Torture Victims. So these NGOs, they play a crucial role. And in Kazakhstan also, several NGOs, we will talk about this in this slide. So Germany, let's talk about Germany. So in Germany, I would like to highlight 3 NGOs. The Violence Prevention Network is one of these very important German civil society organizations, actively working on the ground with practitioners. And this NGO supports the whole reintegration process. And NGO Grüner Vogel also serves as a counseling center for returnees, and practitioners work there as case managers and counselors. And Counter-Extremism Project in Germany. It's a think tank, but it has been playing a very important role in advocacy and research, providing with original research. So reports of these organizations was very useful for us also to understand the approach of Germany. And Kazakhstan, I would say dozens of NGOs have been playing important role in Kazakhstan. So Kosovo, we talked about, and Uzbekistan, for example. So we conducted interviews with practitioners, and here they quote from Uzbekistan. If you look at the compendium, we have several boxes, several types of boxes. So one box is with relevant practices, and another type of box is with quotes from the practitioners. So one of these quotes is Nazifa Kamolova, director of NGO Istiklal Awardee from Uzbekistan. So she's saying here, so several NGOs in Uzbekistan, including our organization, have been heavily involved in the rehabilitation and reintegration of women and children. So indeed, civil society organizations are really playing different roles. For example, restoration of documents, issue birth certificates, and they represent these people in courts. So I cannot imagine, for example, especially in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, it was really hard and impossible without NGOs. So they played crucial roles. So practice number 4, mobilization of multidisciplinary specialists and capacity building. So as we know, returnees have unique and complex needs. And I think state agencies would be, for them, it would be really hard to meet their needs. So that's why it's really crucial in advance to identify what kind of specialists will be crucial in the process. So they should be mobilized, they should be trained in advance. And I would like to highlight Kazakhstan's experience, for example. Kazakhstan was first country to repatriate, but Kazakhstan managed it well. They mobilized dozens of theologians and psychologists, and then they were somehow trained and explained what kind of people they are arriving from Syria and Iraq. And they were ready in the adaptation center in the Mangostan region, and they were ready to work with them. Of course, they had some shortages, problems still, but I think Kazakhstan's case is a really positive case too. And key practice 5, the importance of family ties and biographical work, for example, in Germany. And I think for countries, and especially I would like to highlight that European countries need to understand that family ties, family members are really key actors to help in rehabilitation and reintegration. So family members can offer a unique source of compassion and psychological support, and also financial aid. And for example, in Uzbekistan's approach is family-based. So here, Olia Muradova, director of Barqarar Hayat in Uzbekistan, she's saying that its family model is very important, and Uzbekistan didn't create any shelters, additional shelters, because all family members were ready to accommodate them. And Uzbekistan encourages active participation of family members in each stage of. So, for example, she's saying that we had such successful cases when women attended our professional trainings organized by our center together with their mothers or mothers-in-law. So, Kyrgyzstan, how legal guardianship in Kyrgyzstan was successful. Kyrgyzstan started working with family members, relatives in advance. And Kyrgyzstan spent more than 1 year to work with family members to prepare them to adopt these children who were repatriated from Iraqi prisons. So they worked hard to select the family members and study their living conditions, for example, educational level, all these factors, you know. And then 2 conditions were put on the table. So Kyrgyzstan repatriated children from Iraqi prisons on 2 conditions. First is women, their mothers in the Iraqi prisons should give their consent. Second condition was one of the relatives should be ready to adopt this child. So that's why all 79 children, they are now living in their families, with their families. So they are adopted. And of course, family members, they are playing a crucial role in rehabilitating these children. And of course, in Netherlands, also familial interaction during the custody is very important because majority of women, they are convicted. But Netherlands understand that family ties are very important and they try to keep the children and mother relationship very close, you know, because separation for children is very stressful, but they visit prisons, they see their mothers. So it's good that even during the separation, it's really important to keep this tie. And next is treating children as victims. So I would like to highlight that all focus countries, they understand this state obligation, and children, all children, they are victims, and they should be protected. So in the focus countries, children were treated as victims and received all kind of support, medical care, education, and religious counseling, also cultural activities. And next key practice is building an efficient media strategy. So including ethical trainings for local journalists also. So as you know, Central Asian countries, especially, they built narratives for destigmatization, and they convey this narrative through media. So I would like to highlight that media strategy is crucial, and at the same time, journalists also, especially in Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, they received additional knowledge and also knowledge about international obligations of countries and regarding the ethical standards like don't harm, for example. So I would like to highlight the role of UN agencies, especially UNICEF. They play a crucial role in training journalists. So here are some examples. So for example, we interviewed one of the journalists in Kyrgyzstan who said that I wrote a series of articles and conducted interviews about repatriation, and also participated in trainings organized by UNICEF. And also Kazakhstan, for example, Kazakhstan's media strategy was very efficient. From the beginning, Kazakh government selected pool of leading media outlets and worked with them closely. And as a former journalist, what I liked is all journalists, they couldn't approach returnees, and the interviews were conducted only by consent of returning women. This was really, from my side, I really highly appreciated this one. So it was very careful strategy, and all media, they were trained how to write, and also they were trained about the ethics and how to interview returnees. And also Kyrgyzstan conducted interviews, especially in the southern region, because all returnees, they went to Osh and Jalalabad. So key practice 8, securing long-term psychological support. It's very challenging for many countries. Even in some focus countries, we found out that psychological assistance is not there, because after the COVID pandemic, many countries, especially European countries, they feel like shortage of psychological assistance, you know, because many people, they feel depressed, and even not returnees, normal people also, they need psychological assistance. So that's why some countries, they are really struggling to provide this psychological assistance. But there are some good practices, especially in Central Asia. And even during COVID pandemic, psychologists, they worked online with returnees. So especially in Kazakhstan, I would like to highlight Zoom Rusan program. So this program provided psychological assistance online during the pandemic. And key practice 9, empowerment of female returnees. So as I said earlier, many women, they joined their family members and they have 5 children, 3 children, they are small. So that's why economic independence is a huge issue in many countries. But Kosovo, for example, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, they organized professional courses, trainings, and even they provided women with small grants. So dozens of women in these countries, they opened small businesses. So they stay at home with their children, but they started working, you know, they have small businesses. And some women, they started studying, and some received small professional courses to become, for example, cooker, for example, and or they are working in beauty salons, for example. I think it's a very good practice to empower female returnees. And so here you can see from Olga Rul from Kazakhstan, what she's saying, and from Rebecca Kenna, Community Development Fund in Kosovo is playing a huge, important role in Kosovo. So I think we'll stop here. And I think we will have a chance to discuss more during the Q&A session. So I will stop sharing. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Rozbakova, for your detailed breakdown of the compendium. And indeed, the compendium, and specifically the promising practices contained in the compendium, are an important addition and development in our understanding of reintegration and rehabilitation, successful practices. And additionally, I know that we at the Bulan Institute do hope that it will contribute to the building of comprehensive and tailored rehabilitation and reintegration programs across the world. And so with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, today we do have the great honor of having with us Her Excellency, Ms. Finanola Neoline, who again is the UN Special Rapporteur on the promotion and protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms while countering terrorism, and who today will reflect on the current situation in northern Syria and current state approaches towards repatriation. Ms. Neoline was appointed to this position by the Human Rights Council in 2017 and was further re-elected by member states for another 3-year term in 2020. As UN Special Rapporteur, Ms. Neoline has done substantial work in pursuing legal analyses and mobilizing UN efforts that pertain to the current situation with regards to ISIS-linked women and children. In addition to this, she's been a key figure in advocating for human rights at the international level and pushing state obligations towards these women and children. And so with that being said, Ms. Neoline, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen. It's a real pleasure to be with you all today. I wish it were in person in Geneva, but maybe the next time we'll get to do that. So I wanted to start by commending Chopin and the Bulan Institute for this excellent and timely publication. And with the ambassador, I also wanted to stress that the Bulan Institute, with its limited resources, has continued to be the singularly reliable source in respect of national practices associated with return and repatriation. And I think none of us can really detract from the importance of that focus on national practice. Because while many of us are aware of the humanitarian and human rights catastrophe that defines the current situation of mass arbitrary detention in the camps in northeast Syria, much less is known about what happens to people when they go home. As I think previous speakers have stressed, the vast majority of the camp's inhabitants are children, and the vast majority of those children are under 10 years old. And so, as I have consistently said as Special Rapporteur, the only international law compliant situation to this unfolding and unending human tragedy that is defined by the stunted lives and the harmed existence of these children, that defines day-to-day living in Al-Hol and Al-Raj and other camps, is human rights compliant repatriation. And I underscore that repatriation has to be done in a human rights compliant way. And I think it's really important that we remain attuned to the dominant legal frameworks that define state obligation in this space, specifically the international treaties like the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and the CAT, the Convention Against Torture. And it's important, of course, that we supplement those treaties with soft standards like those that the ambassador has mentioned, but the core hard law obligation of states here is defined by their treaty obligations. And I think it's regretful to many of us that many states are not implementing their treaty obligations. So it's particularly important that this compendium of promising practices focuses on the states that are doing good work, states that are trying to address the situation in a sustained and consistent way, and states that are doing that in a way that elevates and affirms their human rights obligations and also the rights and dignities of those who are returned. And I think this focus on maybe what we might call the other side, so the other side when people go home, fills this super important gap in policy knowledge, because it tells lots of governments who are hesitating or who've been reluctant, who are simply refusing to take their national backs, what it looks like to do that work and how other states have mastered some of the particularities at the macro and the micro level of doing it. And that it's actually not rocket science, that actually many states have the capacities to do this work well, to harness their domestic legal, social, economic, political systems to deliver repatriation, and to do that in a way that advances their own strategic security and human rights interests. I think what's also important about this report is, and it's in the title, which is the emphasis on promising practice, noting for all of us that we're really early in the process for many states, and that there's a really long road for us to travel. And while I had a special rapporteur, I've commended states, two of the states in the report, I visited Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, on their good practices. We have to know that what counts is the long-term commitment to making this process work. And so it's that long-term and sustained practice at the national level that ensures the full integration of women and children, and even men. And that's the one big category many states are not prepared to talk about much at all, is one that we all have to grapple with. So promising is a really good term because it tells us we're on a good road, but we're still trying to get there and there's a long way to go. The other thing I think that's important about the work the Bulan Institute has carried out is that there's a diverse array of countries represented in the compendium. And it mixes the practices that we know from countries who've taken the leading edge on demonstrating leadership in repatriation, doing it early and in large scale fashion from Central Asia, with countries in Europe, European countries that have more recently come to adopt systematic practices on repatriation and return. And so by showing a diversity of cases, a diversity of states, what can be done across different legal, political, and system, it tells those states who are lagging behind that actually there's a large variety of states engaged in this work, and that underscores the need for them to move with urgency and determination. So let me say a couple of things about what I took away and would underscore from the mandates work, and I'll share the mandates work and in the chat. So we have a full set of resources available to member states and practitioners that inform some of my remarks today. So the first thing is that we see in the compendium a commitment to holistic practice and integrated practice. And the first thing that I think we learn is that it's an integrated approach that matters. And we see that in the case studies of Germany and Uzbekistan. It addresses, if you do it holistically, you understand that the returning population has multifaceted needs, and you're going to have to address those multifaceted needs in an integrated way. The second thing we learn, I think, is that many of those returning, particularly the vast majority of them being children, is that many of them are deeply and profoundly traumatized by their wartime experiences, and that the intervention we most require is intervention to address that trauma and the need for repair. I want to note that we've had recent reports in the last few weeks from Médecins Sans Frontières and from Human Rights Watch addressing this need for trauma and this need for addressing trauma. And in particular, what I would stress that we have all learned, and that includes the mandate, this report, and many other sources, is that there's a particular importance in maintaining family bonds when you return children and families. And in particular, when we separate children from their mothers or their families, the risks to effective reintegration and repatriation are high. So it's that bond of mother and child in particular that is proven to be extremely important in ensuring that integration works well. And it's absolutely critical to good outcomes for the child. The third issue I think we need to address is stigma. And how we talk about these returnees as a political matter is really important. And I want to say that the mandate, and I and my team in particular, and I'm joined today by Dr. Anne Charbourg, who's the senior legal advisor supporting the work of the mandate, leading the work of the mandate on this issue, is that we're very careful about even using the word associated with ISIL. It's worth reminding that many of the people in these camps were trafficked or groomed online and are victims in the way in which they ended up in this camp. Many of whom were caught up in the maelstrom of conflict, not associated with a particular group. We've had no legal process to determine any status for any individual in any of these detention sites. And absent that legal determination, I think we also have to be super careful about even using the words of association, because damning people by association is an affront to the fundamental rule of law and the dignity of many children who have done nothing more than been born to a particular parent, born in a particular geography, and have had no hand in the choices that were handed to them. So this point about not using stigmatizing language, encouraging the media and political leaders to think about how they describe those coming back is critical. Most of all, we need to remember that many, 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 and all of these children are victims of terrorism. They're as much a victim of ISIL terrorism as anyone else in that region is. And so treating them as victims of terrorism is really critical. Fourthly, I want to say the compendium, but also the work of the mandate, has stressed the need for ensuring that the intersectional needs of women and girls is at the forefront of what we do. And I think there were good examples in the compendium, particularly from Kosovo, on how that can be done. Fifth, I would underscore the point that communities have to be prepared for people coming back. And that hard work has to be done by government. My mandate's engagement with the governments of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan revealed how crucial it is, the political leadership, the political language that's used to prepare the country as a whole and particular communities for people coming back. And I'll personally never forget, in particular, the role in Kazakhstan that grandmothers played, grandmothers of children who were in camps in Northeast Syria played in framing who their children were and what it meant to bring back their children, so that you could make the broader political landscape understand that these were children like any other child and had the same kinds of rights and dignities to be protected. So I think that positive role for framing the communities who are bringing back, framing and preparing communities is critical. So let me close on a couple of the hard issues that still remain with us. The hard issues are that while we have good examples in this compendium of promising practice and states doing what they need to do, we have a disappointing lack of repatriation from a large number of countries who are well placed to bring back their nationals. And many of those countries are the countries who say that they support human rights, gender, and victims of terrorism in other fora. And those states need to enforce their international legal obligations and bring back their nationals. They should not, and I think we need to remember that the burden of managing this challenge regionally is not helped when states don't engage in the solidarity of support that is needed, not just the human rights obligations, but the security and solidarity to other states. Second of all, I think the biggest challenge that no one in a way is prepared to deal with is the holistic solution for the vast majority of persons detained in these camps who are Syrian and Iraqi. And so we need a massive political commitment and legal effort to ensure that that large-scale problem is addressed, and acknowledging in this regard the major efforts the United States has been making to force and engage that kind of holistic solution. Thirdly, we need documentation and registration for people in those camps. Many of them do not have the right to exercise the basic human right of a right to identity. And we're not going to get very far with repatriation for thousands of individuals if they lack identity. The fourth thing we need is a moratorium on citizenship stripping. We see enormous practice of citizenship stripping by countries, third countries, who simply are trying to find ways not to bring their nationals back. And so again, as Special Rapporteur, I would urge states to cease and desist from stripping their nationals of citizenship in a context where they have no legal ability to respond to any charges made against them or capacity to address arbitrary deprivation of their citizenship. Fifthly, we need to address the situation of particularly vulnerable groups. And here I want to highlight the situation of young boys and male adolescents in the detention camps and various other detention facilities in Northeast Syria. States have an obligation to treat boys in particular as victims. And the failure to do that is really an abrogation, a form of sex-based discrimination that is unhelpful and profoundly unfair to boys whose only crime has been to be born to parents in a particular geography. Finally, I want to stress, as we've heard most recently in the really extreme case of the death of 2 young Egyptian girls, it's thrown light on the challenges and the acute dangers of sexual harm and sexual violation and sexual vulnerabilities to those in the camp, a matter that Special Rapporteur Trafficking has also highlighted. And so I would underscore as Special Rapporteur Counterterrorism that we need a fundamental and comprehensive strategy to address issues of exploitation, sexual vulnerability, and to prevent trafficking in the camps. So let me close by saying all of the being done with Bulan Institute and by others to this acute issue is enormously welcome. And we hope that states are listening, that this profound human rights, humanitarian, and security catastrophe will be holistically addressed by those who are in the best position to address it by bringing their nationals home. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Neoline, for unfolding this this current situation and also for conferring your perspective and expertise on this issue. And I would also like to thank you and your team for really promoting a deeper understanding of the complexities that are involved with both repatriation and reintegration. And so next we will be moving to our question and answer session. And for this, I would like to give the floor to our director here at the Bulan Institute, Ms. Rozbakova. And again, to the participants, if you do have a question, please feel free to leave it in the Zoom chat on the right-hand side of the screen. And if you would like to take the floor, please just send us a message.
Thank you very much, Zakari. So we are having a Q&A session. So leave your questions in the chat. So we have already several questions. And I would like to know if Mr. Irfan Sayed will be, could you stay with us for 10 minutes, please? Mr. Sayed.
Yeah, I can stay for about 10 minutes. And there was one last thing I wanted to say as well. If you allow me, I'll just
yes, please go ahead.
A great presentation by the Special Rapporteur, and I think she's exactly right that there are a lot of countries that have abrogated their role in ensuring that they return their citizens. And I've been involved in this conversation for a couple of years now, and I can tell you that with the good work that the Bulan Institute is doing, some of the good work that's happening in other fora, that we're starting to see some level of success, some chipping of the iceberg, if you will, that some countries who were at an absolute no just a few months ago have really taken a lot of steps to make the decision to repatriate and then put forth the good efforts that are outlined in the compendium to develop those rehabilitation, reintegration programs. So again, as noted, it's a two-step process. Make the decision to bring them back home, but bring them back home in a human rights respecting way, ensure that they are not treated inhumanely, make sure that we do the programs that are needed, the psychosocial support that's needed to bring them back home. I think that we're starting to see the tide turn, fingers crossed, but the type of work that the Bulan Institute is doing can only help ensure that more and more and more countries make that proper decision and send people home.
Thank you very much, Mr. Said. So I have one question. So I'm going to ask this question. Maybe Mr. Irfan Said, you answer first, and maybe Ms. Fianula Nualayan, you can add. So I have received one question about the Turkey's last attacks, how it's going to affect the repatriation efforts. And I have additional question regarding the hesitance of Kurdish forces, because we had a case very recently. Ukraine wanted to repatriate several times, for example, but the problem was Kurdish forces didn't want to give all women and children. So the flight was there, but they promised it, but when the flight arrived, they refused to give women and children. So why the Kurdish forces are having this kind of hesitance? And when the country arrives to take their citizens back, so what is the problem, you think? Thank you very much.
Look, it's a difficult conversation to have on both sides. You know, we're talking about repatriation, but we're also talking about the forces on the ground that are responsible for caring for the citizens, both in the camps as well as in the prisons. And there's a lot of situations that have to go right on both sides. The United States is committing to ensuring that we are not only helping to develop the rehabilitation reintegration programs, but where able, we can offer that assistance on the repatriation side to ensure that the mechanics and the logistics of a repatriation go well. They don't always go well, and I can't explain why sometimes they go very smoothly and why sometimes they don't go very smoothly. And it's has nothing to do with particular countries, because we've had some countries that have done numerous repatriation missions, and the first 2 or 3 could go very well, and the fourth one, did not go well. So again, I don't understand truly how things are different from every mission. I know every mission is separate and distinct, but it does not take away from the fact that the countries are at least continuing to make those requests. And like I said, the U.S. stands ready to help where we can and when able.
Thank you very much. Ms.
Thanks.
Nualayan?
Yeah, I'll speak briefly, and then unfortunately I have to run to another meeting. But I just acknowledge on the former question around the military activities, it's very clear that any military activities in the region are going to be destabilizing to the overall balances that we find there, which are highly precarious, both in terms of the capacity to maintain the camps. We know that already from the prison breakout in Hasaka camp earlier this year, that the non-state actors are extremely stretched. So it just states the obvious that if you have military activities, that stretching is even more stretched, and the difficulties of continuing to hold the camps even as they are, albeit super problematic in terms of human rights and humanitarian, that only serves to worsen and undermine existing problematics. That speaks, I think, again, to the need for a broader, we do not need a piecemeal approach to the challenges in the region. We need a grand bargain. We're very far away from a grand bargain. Current broader political events in other parts of the world make a grand bargain extremely difficult. But in the long term, repatriation is only one part of the solution to the broader political and military problems in the region. So I think we should all understand that. It's not unimportant, but it is relevant. And second, I would say, I think we all understand the complexity of negotiation with the non-state actor are complex. They're complex from country to country. The non-state actor has made clear that the maintenance of these large numbers of citizens that are not their own are an enormous burden on them. And they have made their views known on that, but also it's also clear that the non-state actor sometimes has expectations about what kinds of support will be given to them, either for holding or releasing their nationals. So that is also part of the complexity of the terrain that we're in. At the end of the day, from a security perspective, states' long-term security interests are served by returning their nationals. So it is both a human rights and a security argument that drives the repatriation discussion. And so again, we continue to hope that states who profess their commitment to the coalition to defeat ISIS will maintain their security commitments by returning their nationals. States who are parties to human rights treaties, all of these states equally will enforce their human rights obligations by returning their nationals. So I think on every single, you might think about it as an old-fashioned kind of circling of the wagons here. There's not lots of options for states to say they don't have an obligation to repatriate. And what we want them to do is do that in a human rights compliant way and to ensure that repatriation is successful, because that's what everybody wants. Everybody wants successful repatriation, and states have the tools, including through this compendium, the resources of the mandate and other human rights bodies, the bilateral engagement by supportive states like the United States. There are lots of ways for states to do this well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Neolain. So I guess you'll have to leave now, right? So, but we have Ms. Anne Chabot, legal advisor.
You do, exactly. I have to leave to another meeting, but
thank you very much for being with us.
Yeah, and Chopin, I'll say goodbye as well, but I wanted to at least thank everyone who's participating on this call. It just goes to show you how many people understand the importance of repatriation and doing it the right way. And I know there's a lot of good work being done around the world, but I just came from a GSURF meeting yesterday and today, and some of the work that continues to resonate is with our Albanian partners. So I want to give a quick shout out to our Albanian partner. Lady, I'm looking at you. Thank you so much for all you did at the CVE Center, and we look forward to seeing how the Albanian model can continue to encourage many other countries, both in the region but also outside of the region, to repatriate and follow your model on rehabilitation and reintegration. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you. Bye. So, dear participants, we have Anne Chabot, legal advisor to the mandate of special UN special rapporteur. But we have Anne, thank you for being with us. So we have received several questions for the Bulan Institute. I will answer quickly, and then we will continue with the discussion with Anne Chabot. So we received one question about the challenges. So one of these participants asked if alongside promising practices, we observed some challenges, problems in the focus countries or not. Of course, there are so many problems and challenges, of course, and we don't reflect on the challenges and problems in the compendium, but we have small sections for each country about the challenges. And I think the general challenge in every country is a shortage of financial and human resources. And the main problem is shortage of professionals, specialists, multidisciplinary, because there are psychologists, but not all psychologists, they know working with returnees. This is the main problem in every country. So I think we can move forward. So someone asked, I think Samara, you asked about the, if we spoke to returnees as well. So, as you know, we have been working on the issue for several years. So we conducted interviews with returnees as well. And personally, my personal research also have been on foreign fighters, on returnees. And of course, there is some reflection from female returnees as well. But of course, the main respondents were practitioners, specialists, and experts. But you are doing a really good point, because the main beneficiaries are returnees. So I think there needs to be some reflection from the returnees themselves as well. And now I think we can move with the question to Anne Chabot. And Anne, thank you for being with us. And I had one question for the Ms. Neolain, but I would like to pose this question to you. So as we know, some European countries started softening their positions. So Germany, for example, repatriated women. And do you think it's a good sign that all countries will be repatriating women and children? and what kind of factors influencing, and could you talk about the court decision of the European Human Rights Court? Also, it was crucial, somehow played a role or not, and can we hope that more countries in the coming months will be repatriating?
Thank you, Shulpan. Apologies for just jumping in like this, but I'm delighted
it's a
to be
great
here.
pleasure for us.
So I'd like to think, I mean, that the mandate was amicus, as you know, in the case before the European Court, in the French case before the European Court. So I'd like to think that the European Court case played or was a factor in getting states to repatriate. I think the decision didn't go as far as we would have liked. It doesn't call for, it doesn't outright call for repatriations. However, there are some very positive aspects to the decision. First of all, the court clearly qualifies a number of human rights violations that we had already been calling out. It talks about the legal vacuum that the individuals who are in the camps are in. It talks about the inhuman treatment that they are subject to. So all of these things are quite positive, and they give sort of legal grounding to that. The second key element in our view is that it does, while not going as far as we would have liked, it does nonetheless reinstate a modicum of human rights and procedural guarantees in a process that frankly had simply none. So yes, I think it is overall quite a positive decision. And it's also very positive because it applies obviously not just to France, but to all Council of Europe member states, at least in theory. I think the other factor that played an important part in the fact that states are starting slowly to repatriate their citizens is that, frankly, from a security perspective, the situation was untenable. And I think security services had been saying this to governments, to their own national counterparts, that had been saying this for quite a while. And I think that the attack on Al-Sana prison in Hasaka and the situation in the camps that has been continuously deteriorating was a clear sign that, you know, this something needed to change. So I think both of these factors probably played a role in the fact that states are willing to repatriate.
Thank you, Chopin. Like Chopin said, this concludes our question and answer session today, and hence the launch event. And again, the compendium is already published on our website. Please feel free to read it and share it with your colleagues and network. And then additionally, I would like to thank Mr. Saeed, Ms. Neoline, and additionally Ms. Shortwood for their professional insights and perspectives. Your contributions are truly crucial to this discussion, and were fascinating. And hopefully this conversation and this event really imparts advice and ideas to policymakers who are responsible for repatriation, reintegration efforts. Thank you as well for all the participants that made time to come to this event today, and who also were very crucial in engaging with our experts. We will be hosting more of these events and dialogues in the future, so please stay tuned to the Bulan Institute. And if you like this event, please inform your friends and partners, and please do not hesitate to reach out to us at the Bulan Institute. And in the meantime, I wish you a wonderful day wherever you may be, and we look forward to hosting more events like this in the future. Thank you.